Today we'll rank every version of the god Anubis from movies, series, games, and more. Let's go. Here are the Anubis versions shown. The ranking starts at Jackal and goes up to Basic, which is the trash tier here. Reminder, this list ranks versions by faithfulness to mythological Anubis, not power level. And of course, I'll also take into consideration the universe that Anubis is in, and there will be a lot of my own opinion and personal taste here as well. Let's start here with Anubis from a 2014 horror movie, and the movie is The Pyramid. I'll show you a scene to give you an idea of this Anubis. Now, explaining why Anubis might be seen as a demon, in the movie, this Anubis was an evil creature banished from the afterlife. And since he wanted to reunite with his father, Osiris, he went around trying to find a pure soul and absorb it through its heart. In the scene I showed you, you can see him performing the famous ritual of weighing the person's heart. Arm the god and turns on the scale. But originally, who would devour the heart? And actually, if the heart was already going to be devoured, it wouldn't be pure at all. Actually, Amit would devour it, not Anubis. And anyway, a group of builders kind of made a pyramid to trap Anubis. But then, just like in Scooby-Doo, a group of archaeologists discovered this place. Then they found our beloved bald dog. To me, it looks like a dog, not a jackal. Although, if we look at those jackal statues they had in Egypt, it's actually not that different. And that Anubis there looks much more like a werewolf than an Egyptian god, right? Because he has a whole animal body, right? A whole dog body, even the paws, that's what Anubis has. Actually, he only had the head of a jackal. The rest of his body was completely human. There's also the fact that this Anubis never speaks, right? He just keeps groaning and making angry noises, and then he turns on the Tardeo. Even though it's a horror movie and they made Anubis look scarier, I thought it was funny because it looks more like PlayStation 2 game computer-generated imagery than a real movie. I also found it funny that when he's weighing the person's heart to eat, it looks like he's using a butcher shop scale. It didn't really appeal to me, so I'll keep it in the trash tier. If you want more tier lists, check out my playlist. This channel features videos on Zeus, Thor, and Brazilian laws. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, because it helps me a lot, and if you want, you can help even more. You can become a member here on the channel, which costs just a little, and you'll be giving me huge support. Thank you so much to everyone who is a member of the channel. Reminder, the pinned comment includes several Amazon links for mythology books, games, perfume, and headphones. Check it out, everything's on sale. This one's a weird Anubis, since he's also in a live action. You'll see in this tier list that Anubis isn't suited to be a live-action movie actor, right? Because every movie that does this, Anubis always ends up messed up. This one even looks related to the last Anubis. Anubis, come closer. And this Anubis is from that infamous movie, Gods of Egypt, which, interestingly, you can watch entirely here on YouTube. I don't even know how that's possible, but to be fair, this Anubis's look is a little different from the one in the horror movie. He has some golden details that vaguely resemble the classic looks of the god Anubis. He also has this scepter here, which is really cool, and this one doesn't keep moaning either throughout the whole movie. No, he actually has lines. He really talks.
The gates of the earth are open. This is where your journey should begin.
And in the movie, he's a psychopomp, a guide of souls. Which, in fact, Anubis is in mythology, but it's kind of weird to have to summon Anubis to take someone's soul. What happens in the movie when the protagonist's girlfriend dies? And it's actually kind of cool. The scene where he takes the woman's soul to the underworld, to a kind of line of the dead, even though that scene isn't exactly accurate. There's even a boat for the dead, which actually resembles Greek mythology more than Egyptian, that the soul, in this case, would have to go through a labyrinth, trials, and all that. Later, this Anubis is summoned again by other gods, like Hathor. I think his most memorable scene is when our big dog stops Apophis from entering his realm. By the way, this Apophis looks a lot like the first Galactus from the first Fantastic Four movie, because they turned this giant serpent into this here. Apophis ended up becoming a storm. But anyway, Anubis ended up using a little hand power there to hold the snake. Anyway, like I said, this Anubis is very similar to the Anubis from the Pyramid movie with a few extra details. But when he speaks, he sounds more rational and carries a staff. I was going to say he's well adapted to the movie's universe. However, I just realized Anubis is the only one with animal traits in the movie, right? For example, we have the pirate Horus and Hathor, who doesn't have a cow's head. It would be hard to do, but still, right? It's a characteristic of the goddess Apophis with the little rain, so in this way, Anubis even ends up standing out. It seems he's the sole god in the movie, Mim. I think I'll put him in the good guy category. That's good enough. And he's above that freak over there. Well, the next one is from American Gods, or translating American Gods. And here I'm only going to talk about Anubis from the series, okay? Because the book, I have no idea what he's like. And this Anubis here, I think he's really awesome, okay? Even though I have my issues with universes that end up adapting gods to modern times, I think he's really awesome because of his appearance. Here, a woman tries to reach something on the top shelf, and then the camera starts showing her cat and her stool moving. Apparently nothing happens. Someone knocks on her door, and when she answers, a man appears.
This is not a mistake. You have to come with me, Mrs. Fadil.
Right then, Egyptian music starts playing in the background, making the mood tenser. And the guy starts saying that it was time for that woman to follow him, and the lady even doubts it. She starts finding it a bit strange, right? Of course, that's normal, but then the guy there, who in this case is Anubis, shows her own body lying on the ground, completely smashed and lifeless. And then he explains that her family would find her, give her a proper burial and all that. But then the woman asks, why Anubis? To Egypt's an Egyptian god would be receiving a soul from a Muslim home, Anubis. He answers the following.
You were once a girl with your own Tita, who taught you the ways of ancient Egypt. She told you the stories of the wolf and the jackal.
The good in that. Then they go up to the top of the house and suddenly they were in the middle of a desert. Anubis begins his famous judgment, but it's really Osiris's judgment, not Anubis's, correct? But anyway, Anubis ends up helping in this ritual. Anubis even takes the lady's heart out. And she manages to pass that test, and even Anubis himself ends up choosing her afterlife, her duat. Even though I think this scene and Anubis are really good, I have to be fair. Because, well, in terms of appearance, he leaves a lot to be desired. Since the theme song, Ali from Egypt, is playing in this scene, almost any god of death could replace Anubis. Since we lack an Enki, his scepter, and any sign linking him to being an Egyptian god, we have no evidence. You can't really make Anubis without his jackal head. It would look weird. So I'll just leave him as a nice guy. The next one is from Shimigami Tensei, which is a role-playing game, and apparently, at some point, Anubis in Shimigami Tensei had the same story as in Mythology. Maybe in the past, right? His description says the following. Anubis is widely known as the Egyptian god of mummification. In this role, he oversees the mummification process of the dead, and is usually depicted in tomb hieroglyphs, supervising the burial rituals of pharaohs and other people of the royal lineage. This occurs because priests in the ritual wore Anubis masks to represent their supervisory role. His position as judge comes from the ancient Egyptian belief that he judged those entering the afterlife, using a scale to weigh the heart of the deceased, lightened by good deeds or weighed down by sins. It could be as light as a feather or as heavy as a stone. If the heart was heavier than the feather, it would be devoured by a meat, and the judged person would not be able to continue their journey toward the irises and immortality. But, however, nevertheless, Anubis isn't that important in the game story. At least not that I found. Unlike some characters with their own arc, there in Shimigami Tensei, Anubis is usually treated more as part of the mythological setting that you end up encountering during the game, summoning or calling. He wouldn't have an exclusive story. He serves as a symbol within the supernatural, representing justice and life after death. His motivations in the Shimigami Tensei lore are not deeply explored in terms of personal story. He is there representing the concept of a judge of the dead, a guide for those who take care of the process of transition between life and death. More than just a character, but because of his good appearance and mythological items, he is very similar to the mythology, so he goes in the great tier. The next one here is Drew, and no, I'm not talking about Chris's brother, but Anubis from Dislyte, which, from what I understand, is a mobile role-playing game that has gods as characters. If you thought it was weird that Anubis here is named Drew, wait until you see Ashley, who in this case is Handel. Yeah, well, actually, there's an explanation for that, okay? It's because the characters in the game are espers. Like, the espers are supposed to be representatives of the gods, but not the gods themselves. They wouldn't be gods in the full sense of the word. The idea is that humans in this case would receive them through a supernatural event called miracles. By the way, there's going to be another game here that does something very similar too. But anyway, after this so-called miracle, the avatars would receive powers from the gods. They channel, host, and manifest attributes and powers that are closely tied to these mythological deities. Apparently, Drew would be the butler at a house called Rameses, which, by the way, makes him the most stylish Anubis on this list. And there, he also took care of a boy named Ollie, the heir of the Rameses family, being almost like an older brother or guardian figure. In other words, he played the same role as Anubis, when the god of the dead, the god of humanization, would take care of and be the guardian of Oro. Apparently, Ollie disappeared from that house, which drove Drew insane, until a friend of his helped him get over it, which led Drew to join Sperunian, go through his miracle, and become an avatar of Anubis. And I really like this version of Anubis here, mainly because they made him kind of a butler, or his avatar in this case, right? That reminds me of Hermes as the god's butler in Greek mythology, their messenger god, right? When Romans merged their gods with Egyptian and Greek ones, Anubis became closely linked to Hermes. Also, Drew's base skin closely resembles Anubis. He has the helmet, the scepter, the scales. I really like this bluish color of Anubis too, which sets him apart a bit from that Anubis that's always extremely similar to a jackal. Even though it's different, it stays true to the original. Plus, he has the awesome butler skin, which is really cool. Well, since he's an avatar, I'm not going to put him at the top, but I'll leave him in excellent. Of course, we have Anubis from Age of Mythology, which, for those who don't know, is a strategy game, a civilization game. It features several gods, including those from Egyptian mythology. Each god offers unique abilities and minor buffs when selected. If you have Anubis, you can, for example, get the plagues of serpents when Anubis summons them, right? Obviously, they defend an area. There's also the Anubite, which would be a fast melee unit that can jump to enter combat. That's just how it is. The game's story about the gods matches the mythology exactly. The new art is so beautiful, right? It's gorgeous. The old one honestly wasn't great. Here we have the first Anubis, which is in jackal form, and the next one here is from the movie The Mummy Returns, which has that famous scene with the Scorpion King with such beautiful computer-generated imagery. So beautiful that it rivals the computer-generated imagery from the old Max Steel. By the way, I just learned something wild about the Scorpion King that I didn't know. Not sure if everyone knows, but the Scorpion King is a successful franchise with around 300 movies. There's the Scorpion King 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, The Mummy Returns, and it just keeps going. Movie. Apparently, the Scorpion King has a story that's very similar to Kratos. I had no idea because, the Scorpion King was a really good general who ended up conquering a bunch of different lands. But at a certain point, he ended up being defeated, and they sent him to a sacred desert called Aranchir or something like that, Aranchire. Anyway, some sacred desert there. Then all his men except himself began to succumb to hunger, thirst, and extreme heat. And then what did he decide to do? Like Kratos giving his soul to Ares to defeat the barbarian king, the Scorpion King did the same. But with Anubis, he eventually gets an army from him. But whenever he wins his battles, Anubis always takes him back to the underworld, and that's where he stays for the rest of eternity. And what I just told you is basically the very beginning of the movie, The Mummy Returns. This movie's amazing special effects are truly moving. You can feel the excitement and passion the creators had making it. That's why I like this Anubis. Compared to the rest of the movie, I thought he was done well, except for the fact that he basically screams. And he has an army. I don't know why, that Anubis, who's the god of mummification and the psychopomp, has an army. But okay, I think it's fine. It's actually pretty good. The next Anubis here is from the Marvel universe, in this case from the comics. because I don't remember if Anubis ever appeared in the Moon Knight series or in any other movie. I don't think so, but anyway, Anubis in Marvel is just like the one from Mythology. He would have had a difficult birth there, right? Being the son of an affair between Osiris and Nephthys, who was Set's wife, this would later lead Set to end up killing Osiris. Anubis, as the god of mummification, prepared his father's body for the afterlife. In Marvel, he's seen as the god of rebirth and mummification, and so on and so forth. But from that point on, the story starts to get a little different. Actually very different, because Anubis simply tries to steal time. Celestial throne of Ra, he tries to steal his heart, but Ra ends up giving his heart. For Bastet, she'd be the cat goddess, or in Marvel's case, right? The panther goddess Bastet decided to hide Ra's heart there in Africa, and there she ended up finding a tribe of very powerful warriors who ended up serving her. In fact, when she went there to leave the heart, she chose one of those warriors to represent her. And with that, she ended up founding the city of Necropolis in Wakanda, with the mission of protecting this divine secret. Continuing, so during the Hyborian Age, Anubis was also worshipped as Nubis in the mystical kingdom of Stygia. Nubis even appeared in another story, when an African warrior named Nkatu ended up being taken prisoner and was cursed by a sorcerer named Nephros, who turned him into a living mummy. After centuries of wandering, Nkatu returned to Nephros to end his immortality, and then Anubis appeared, offering him eternal rest as long as Nkatu collected some souls. And even though he was a bit reluctant at first, Nkatu ended up accepting and promised that he would hunt down the wicked. And out of curiosity, just like Khonshu does in Marvel, Anubis also has his own cult of worshippers, known as the Sons of the Jackal. And through this order, he chose his earthly avatar, naming Randall Spectre, the brother of Moon Knight, as his agent in the world of the living. Randall then took on the mantle of Jackal Knight, serving directly under the god, Anubis. Although Anubis is somewhat evil throughout Marvel's history, I thought he was well adapted for this universe, especially because his previous story is exactly like his mythological story. His design changes in each comic, but overall, I thought Anubis was very well done. He has a jackal head, helmet, scepter, human body, and even artwork showing lightning from his eyes, which I thought was cool. So he definitely fits as a jackal. Detective Comics' Anubis reportedly shares the same origin as the mythological Anubis, starting as the son of Osiris, with Nephthys having had all that fight with Set, with Osiris. Apparently, Anubis isn't very important in Detective Comics. The only story I found about him is the one with the mummy forgotten in time, when Dr. Fate senses a cosmic disturbance. While walking through an Egyptology museum, he discovers the mummy of Calus, an ancient being who got an amulet from Anubis and tried to conquer Egypt before Nabu stopped him. It's like that, a whole fight with this Calus guy. Then the situation only gets resolved when Dr. Fate ends up invoking the name of Amun-Ra, and Calus completely crumbles to ashes. I'm not sure if there's a story where Anubis appears like that, but I couldn't find one. If anyone knows more about comics, feel free to comment. Since I didn't find much, I'll be generous. Next is Anubis from Palworld, our dear Palworld, and honestly, I don't have much to say. He resembles Anubis, but lacks a backstory and isn't exactly Anubis. I'll call him a nice guy since he's not trash or like that horror movie creature. Next up is Anubis from JoJo, created 500 years ago, before the events where Jotaro's crew goes to Egypt to try to beat up Dio Anubis. Here is one of the stands, and I can't really explain exactly to you what a stand is, but it's kind of like a JoJo power. That's what you need to understand. Anubis was reportedly the stand of Caravanserai, but after this guy died, Anubis ended up merging with the sword he had forged himself, making the blade its new wielder. And 5 centuries later, Dio ended up finding Anubis in a museum, and after defeating it with his stand, Anubis ended up swearing loyalty to Dio, and it was sent there to Egypt to try to stop JoJo's group from reaching Dio, who gets to keep that sword. Anubis usually possesses people. He did this to Shaka, who became controlled by the stand after unsheathing the blade out of curiosity. He killed several of his companions and even fought Polnareff, who ended up defeating him and took the sheathed sword with him. After that, he later possessed a barber named Can. He was defeated by Jotaro, and though Star Platinum split him in half, Anubis still survived. He even possesses Polnareff himself later, but ends up being defeated after being tricked by Jotaro, who grabs the hilt of his sword. But Anubis still manages to survive, but then a series of disasters happens. Because in this way, the half of the blade that Anubis possessed ended up with a child. That child ended up tripping and threw the sword far away. The blade gets stuck in a cow's butt. The cow crosses the Nile, and the blade falls into the river, rusting at the bottom. Anubis is apparently destroyed. So, this Anubis for JoJo is great, mainly because its design closely follows the mythological Anubis. And even though he's not the god Anubis, I think he's much better represented than all the others there in Bonzino. Next, here's Anubis from Smite, who, according to his description, Anubis, the jackal-headed god, holds supreme judgment over the dead, weighing each heart by the weight of truth. Nephthys, wife of Seth, god of darkness, wanted a child, but her husband was infertile. Nephthys, disguised as Isis and Seth, Osiris's wife and Seth's brother, seduced Osiris. Anubis was born and raised by Osiris as his own son. After Seth murdered Osiris, Anubis embalmed and mummified his adoptive father so that he would not rot. This preservation practice was shared with the faithful, as what was fit for the gods was fit for men. No one enters the abyss of the underworld without first being tested by Anubis. He is the embalmer when bodies are preserved and the final judge at judgment. He guards the legendary scales in his domain. On one side is Mot, the goddess of truth and order. On the other, he places the deceased's heart. If Mot's weight is far greater than the heart, Anubis casts the soul into the underworld's darkness, where it is forgotten and never reborn. Changing details such as Nephthys wanting a child and Seth being infertile doesn't occur in the original story. And also because Anubis would cast the souls into the underworld, not to myth, just like all the other mythological figures. I think Smite adapts Anubis really well here, especially in his artwork, which is gorgeous. He also has all the Egyptian clothes he should have, and he also has his scepter. Although here they also kind of made Anubis look like a werewolf, right? He looks more like a werewolf, doesn't he? He has his whole body there, looking like that of a wolf or a jackal. Here, they only had to make his body below the chest fully human. But aside from that, I think he's really good, so I'll also put him in the jackal category. Next is Anubis from Yu-Gi-Oh! There are two. First, the villain from Yu-Gi-Oh!, who only shares the name Anubis and isn't related to the original figure. So he's going straight to the trash, just to save us some time here. And the second one, we have the Anubis card, which has the following description. It cannot be normal summon. It must first be set and then must be special summoned from your hand or from the graveyard. When you have 3 or more cards in your graveyard with different names that are Temple of the Kings and or traps, by placing 2 of them on the bottom of the deck in any order, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard and add a man with the mark from your deck to your hand. If 1 or more spell or trap cards you control are destroyed by a card effect, you can target 1 card your opponent controls and destroy it. You can use each effect of Anubis, the final judge, once per turn like this. It's not Anubis, right? A card of Anubis. I think we can call it a good guy, especially for Yu-Gi-Oh! The next one is from League of Legends. Nasus is clearly inspired by Anubis, especially since all of Shurima draws from ancient themes. Nasus is part of the Ascended, a class of people chosen to go through a ritual and become kind of demigods or even gods. It depends on how you see Nasus. He was highly intelligent, studied all philosophy and histories, and became a great general. Though he knew war was important, he disliked fighting, unlike his brother Renekton, who was his complete opposite. When they learned Nasus would die from illness, they decided to put him in the sun disk ritual to make him ascended. But Nasus was so weak he could hardly climb the altar steps, much like his fear of being destroyed by the sun disk. No one wanted to go with him except Renekton, who seemed to sacrifice himself, or so they thought. Actually, rather than being destroyed, Renekton also ascended with his brother. As Renekton grew more savage and Nasus wiser, they fought often. And the situation got even worse after Azir's ascension because it ended up going wrong. When the brothers returned to the city from far away, they only saw several Shuriman bodies. And also the one responsible for all of that, Zerath, and the two of them faced him, but Zerath ended up kind of getting trapped in the tomb along with Renekton. Renekton and Zerath were trapped there so long that Nasus eventually lost his sense of purpose. Just to recall that purpose. When he saw the sun rise and learned Azir was reborn, I don't even need to say more, right? Their story is a great adaptation of Anubis for the League of Legends universe. Note you can't place him in Excellent or Jackal, since he's not truly Anubis. He's inspired and his design is better than many others here. The next one is just trash. Bushes. Seriously, what is this? I mean, you can tell it's supposed to be Anubis because of the Egyptian clothes they put on him. But man, what is this? Seriously. They turned Anubis, a guardian of Horus, a psychopomp god, an ancient god of death, into a furry. Come on, man. Anubis is supposed to be scary. But here he looks like he'd wag his tail if I petted him. Come on, what's this? If you watch this far, leave a like, subscribe, share, and hype it up. See you next time. If you want to see more videos like this one, just click on the playlist that's showing up.